That looks good. Alright, that should be good for today. Good morning, everybody. Figured out the mistake I was making the other day. So, turned out as usual, it was user error. So, you know, always check for that first, right? Figure out what was going on with it. Turned out it was 100% my fault. Let's see. Really like mechanical. The lights. There we go. I'll fill in some of these gaps with mechanical stuff. That might be good. See the whole thing in the picture. That's pretty useful. Let's put it there. It's big enough, right? I appreciate that. Just a little sketchbook page here. I got some ink. I got some white ink on here. It's colored pencil, and airbrush. I was making a mess the other day because when I was adjusting some of the settings, because I'm new to airbrushes, so learning a little bit about it. Not a lot. I mostly just wanted for some tonal stuff and some of the splattering it can do. This is mostly what I really wanted for. Maybe more later on, but that's kind of what I was looking at it for mostly. And but yeah, I've never had a class or anything with it, so I was making mistakes. Like I have no real experience with it, so I bought one like a year and a half ago, and I finally opened it up. I don't know, a month and a half ago, but I've been away, so I haven't had any time to look at it. And so, in trying to figure out where the problem was that I originally caused, I caused another one where I loosened up the part of the base that attaches to the hose had gotten loose, and I didn't realize that, which is why it was backloading a bunch of ink into the system. Now I know. That's, I guess, how you learn, right? Make a lot of mistakes. I wish I could convince my students that that's just part of the problem. When you're trying to figure out things, you're going to make errors. So, yeah. So lesson learned, and now I know I got a fake person over there I need to deal with. There's two of them right at the same time. Got it. How's our connection looking over there? Actually, I should check it over here too, just to see. So I noticed the replay on the YouTube side was really, really janky. Looks like it still is, and I don't know why. I've got solid connection. No drop frames. But looks clean over there. But why is it janky? Oops, sorry. Oh, it's not showing any drop frames. How about if I stop the kick one? It's definitely super janky over on YouTube. I don't know why. Let's see how it looks here in a second. I haven't had this problem in a long time. Long time. Try, hold on a second here. You want to keep Wi-Fi on. I don't know if anyone's seeing the YouTube feed, but like it shouldn't be slow at all. It looks great on the broadcasting machine. It says it's got full connection. Encoding overloaded, sometimes video settings or faster encoding preset. Huh. There is a problem, but I don't know why it's having a problem. Output. Keyframe, CPU usage. Switch it to 5,000. Okay. Sorry, just realized I'm having a problem. Little technical issue that I didn't realize was going on. Let's see if this will clean things up. Still says there's a problem. Video settings. These are the faster encoding presets. I haven't had this kind of problem in a long time. I don't know if there's something running in the background on here that I'm not aware of. Output. Higher equals less. Fine. Okay. It doesn't show any dropped frames, but it's telling me I've got encoding overload. Let's see if I can fix that at all. I don't know. Hate it when things are fine and then all of a sudden they're not. That looks really slow. Could just be the computer. It needs to be updated. Update stable. Stream. Output. There we go, to 3,000. Sorry, just doing a little tech support, because it used to be fine, and all of a sudden it's just like crazy janky over there. I don't know why. Still appears to be. That's a little bit better. Let's try one more step here. I mean, it's not sharp as I would like it to be, but maybe I just need to set up my work computer to do this rather than try to use my old MacBook here, or restart my MacBook more often or something. Did that apply it? Just to double check. Okay. I'll go with that for a bit and see how that runs. But scoot this over a bit, just so it's more. There we go, more visible. But yeah, it seems better. It's not great resolution, but maybe that's something worth doing for myself. Is just using the work computer here. So I'm not going to really need it very much at the school this semester. I think it's technically faster than my desktop in certain ways. Maybe I'll try that out today if I can't get the settings set are all transferred over, set up on it. Figure out a way of setting it up on my desk here so it's not annoying to plug it in every time. You know? Definitely less janky over there, but still it's not 100% great. Or maybe I should broadcast from the desktop and then record stuff on the MacBook. Could try doing that, reverse it. I'm going to play around with that today. But so like these doodle pages, I like to kind of go in and fill in the gaps. So I like to kind of maximize what's on the page. In this case, grabbing some assorted reference sources or making something up, or there's different categories. You know, I don't know. That's kind of what my brain is going to here. And of course, the great things about doing this kind of thing is filling it up helps me kind of play with the tools a bit. I think having like a maxed out sketchbook page tool is kind of fun to look at anyway. Still haven't encoding. I might try that today to see if I can get that swapped. The desktop is definitely a more powerful machine than the old MacBook I have. Go. I like red just because I like how it looks. I've got lots of other colors here too. I've got some blue pencils that actually erase more easily, um, and also because what used to be the case is you really had to use blue as your kind of default color because of how photocopying used to work. But because of Photoshop and other similar kind of photo editing tools, you can edit out the colored lines with your pencil, um, no matter what color you're using, because of the adjustment layers that you can use on them. So, um, yeah, I just like it because I like the color. I like orange too, um, but I tend to favor the red just because I can get it in the 2mm LEDs really easily. So that's why red. I like it. I think it has a certain kind of warmth, obviously, and feels very lively. Um, whereas, like a blue line would feel it's a lot more quiet. When we look at blue, we think of calm and clear skies. quiet waters. Whereas red is like, it's the color of blood, it's the color of life, it's the color of fruit. So, it's comes with a natural sort of reactive vitality, which I like. It actually mixes really well with blue. I do a lot of pen and ink drawings where I start with the red and then I do blue details on top with like the ballpoint pen. And they mix really well together too. So, um, that's another kind of plus to it. So those are the reasons why I like it. I'm not sure about other artists. I have seen a number of comic artists using it lately. And again, they used to be more restricted just because there was that non-photo blue, the non-photo reproduction blue. Um, and that made a difference. Wish I knew it was up with the YouTube. So I'm not getting any dropped frames, but I have like coding issues. I have to do a little search to figure that out. So I'd like to just leave my setup alone. Maybe I need to update the OBS or something. I always hesitate to do like immediate updates just because a lot of times they'll break things and you won't realize it until later. But sometimes things are broken because you need to update and some critical issue pops up. So yeah, anyway, that's why I like it. Feels good. Do you have a preferred sketching color? Yeah, I'll play around with that. See what's up. Hate having to do tech support stuff like that. I was doing that again yesterday with my airbrush, trying to figure out what I did wrong, and found an assembly video and discovered I'd loosened a valve in the stem by accident. It's causing me no end of grief. I had no idea what it was. That's the problem when you're kind of teaching yourself something is you can bump into a problem and have no idea what it could possibly be. And at least there's some good information out there, in spite of all the real problems with actually accessing good information. How would you recommend someone wants to learn anatomy? Um, well, I think with anatomy, there's kind of phases. And actually, it was funny. I saw this artist. He's got a big following. I commented on one of his posts because he said, "Oh, you don't need to learn the names of things. Like you just need to know the patterns and this general kind of surface appearance of things." And I was like, I don't think that's the best idea. But I do think there's levels of relevant knowledge at different phases when you're trying to understand. And I've got a ton of anatomy books. I've taught, figure drawing forever and ever. Um, but yeah, I never argue for ignorance ever. So he was saying like you don't need to know the names or how they fit together necessarily. You just need to know their surface appearance. And I would never ever advocate for that, especially in the long term. Like maybe initially, sure, like it's enough information to kind of know, some of the major surfaces. Um, but I would say there's levels. So there's a piece of paper around here that's not this. Where's a nice cheap piece of paper? Let's see. So in terms of studying anatomy, learning anatomy, again, I think there's phases. So like we were saying, I think is like a half truth, where there's a lot of muscles, there's a lot of bones. Let's see if that pen here just works good. But like phase one for me, if you're studying human anatomy, I'd even take one step back and I would study proportions and basic ones. Like the one I like to start with my students is the halfway point on the figure. And it actually has an anatomical name. So if you go from the bottom of your feet to the top of your head, halfway point is in the middle is something called the pubic symphysis. And it happens to also line up with a spot on your bone in your leg called the greater trochanter. And that's the top of your femur, basically. There's a bump at the top. So not the part where it attaches, but your big kind of leg bone It's you know, if there's the ball joint here, it comes over. There's like this part that sticks up a little bit, and that's the greater trochanter. But these 2 points are the halfway point of the figure, and they're also anatomical names. And they're not really that hard to remember. This, you know, this one can be hard to spot. This one's a little bit easier. So it's kind of right above the genitals, basically, is the pubic symphysis, and so like that's like I think that's an important spot. And the reason why you'd want to learn any of the names is it allows you to spot it more easily. So like if you know the name of something, you can kind of point to it more easily. Like if you know the name of an animal or a plant, it's easier for you to spot that plant rather than just saying, well, there's that plant that I see all the time, and there it is again and again. Like knowing the names of things like pubic symphysis or greater trochanter is really helpful. So that's where I would start, is proportions. And then the next step would be major structures. Proportions also like the 7.5 head figure I think is useful. It's not an absolute, but I think it's useful. And then I would go with like major landmarks. So that's like, these are major landmarks. Other ones would be, you know, like your, like, so if you have like a figure, if you look at the skeleton, this point right here, like the center of your chest where it meets, is typically about 1 head down. Like that's really helpful to know. We jump it on back there, Bosch. So if you've got a figure, you know, a skeleton. This is where the great, you know, the pubic symphysis is. This is the femur coming down. There's different proportional systems, but you know, like knowing your patella, you know, knowing the greater trochanter, pubic symphysis spot, being able to spot the head of the humerus, so the top of your upper arm bone, your elbow, also known as the olecranon, which is the proper name. So we've got olecranon, we've got xiphoid, which is the center of your chest process. So olecranon, xiphoid process, we've got greater trochanter or pubic symphysis, and then we've got patella. And then I just go with ankles for the ankle. But like, you know, these are like major landmarks on the body. And that's not a very long list, right? So we listed off 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then in terms of study anatomy, we also look at the skeleton, this little like simplified skeleton I have here. I like to simplify it down so it's a stacking of 3 kind of egg shapes or ovoids on top of each other, and they each have different proportional amounts before you get the, you know, the stick figure coming out of it. And they all kind of just sit directly on top of each other as these form. So in terms of proportions, like the head, of course, is 1 head tall. You know, it's 1 head deep. We got the rib cage. Rib cage is 2 heads wide, 2 heads deep as a mass, and then it's 1 head deep. So 2 heads wide, 2 heads tall, and then 1 head deep. And the similar with the pelvis. The pelvis is 1 head tall, 1 head deep, but 2 wide. This is kind of like an average that I think is useful to know. It's not absolute, but I think it's helpful to kind of see those underlying proportions. So major landmarks, proportions. Again, this is just 5, right? So it's not like that many parts. Some of these are a little harder to know just because they're not as familiar as terms like xiphoid or olecranon or pubic symphysis. I don't take video requests, but appreciate the thing there. So those are like things I would start with. So it's proportions, major landmarks would be the next one we just talked about right there. You know, there's more. You could get into more depth, like, you know, like there's your iliac crest, which is important, which is the top of your hip bone or your pelvis. um, you know, seeing the pit of your neck up there. There's facial proportions and things like that. And then from here, from major landmarks, so you go from proportions to major landmarks on the skeleton. Then I would go from that. So we got 1, 2, and 3. So the next phase would probably be, the major, we call the form figure mannequin. And basically what that is, it's similar to what we have here, except we add on to the figure, we add on, simple 3D primitives to what we have already. So I usually typically use cylinders for the arms, and again the ovoids for the major masses. You can use boxes or pyramids or other kinds of wedges. Like you use wedges for the feet. But the idea is you want to have these set up because it also shows you proportions, right? So if you imagine, we talked about how the pelvis here is 1 head wide. Well, the leg is going to start out as 1 head wide and then gradually get narrower as it goes down. And then the arm is usually going to start out like half a head or something like that, and then gradually get narrower as it goes down. And it varies from person to person, but it's helpful to have some kind of pattern available to you. So that would be the stage 3, would be getting this form figure mannequin down and being able to see it from different points of view. Being able to manipulate it, draw it, different kinds of poses, just from life. Use photography to a certain degree, or reference, or master analyses are really good too. But there's all kinds of things you can do to practice this form figure mannequin. Get a real sense for that 3-dimensional quality that the cylinders have. And you can taper them, or you can leave them just straight. I usually start students off just by keeping them straight. And then step 4 would be, what I like to do is I have a simple, relatively, so not absolutely, but relatively short list. I think it's around 25 to 30 muscles. And what I usually do is I kind of start with the major masses, looking at the torso and the pelvis. So you could start with, if you look at the front of the torso, you've got, once you kind of understood the skeleton, you're like, oh, okay, well, the pectoralis major kind of sits up here as the big torso muscle. And then coming out of it, out of the top, and then going down to the pelvis is your abdominis rectus, or your ab muscles. And then coming out of this is your external obliques. And they sit on top of your pelvis and wrap around the rib cage. And depending on someone's muscle fat ratio, things will be more or less visible. And then you've got the serratus anterior, which is kind of like those little fingers you see sticking around the side. And there's 4 of them that are usually visible. Someone has like crazy low fat proportions, like a bodybuilder. Sometimes you'll see a 5th one, half of a 5th one up there. And then you have your lats coming up from behind. And so then you have that list: pectoralis major, external obliques, the abdominis rectus, serratus anterior, and then you say, oh, okay, well then there's the bones up here. There's a gap inside of there usually, and then you have your deltoid coming up here, and your biceps, and your triceps, and your brachialis, and your brachioradialis. But kind of seeing those in there. So after you've kind of got a sense for that 3D quality of the figure, its proportions, landmarks, then it starts to be easier to do these different parts. I usually go again section by section with this kind of major list of things that I think are most relevant. And you kind of get, like, for example, with the forearm, there's a lot of muscles in the forearms. At this phase, I just simplify it to extensors and flexors. So the extensors are kind of the muscles that lead to the top of your hand, the top side or the back side of your hand, while the flexors are the ones that go to the inside. They flex your hand in. They kind of form two different groups there, but that's generally speaking how I like to do it. So once you've kind of go section by section. Again, I like to start with the largest one, so the torso, front and back, and then you go, upper arm, upper leg, lower leg, and then you can get into like drawing the head. The head has a lot of muscles and things, and there's some that are more important than others. But I kind of start, here, and then you go here and there, and then you go here and there, and then go to the head. Again, I have a truncated list of the major ones. There's a lot of other ones, of course, too, but that's kind of how I do it for my students. Easiest back there. I call it the Ninja Turtle muscle. But that's how I've studied it. And then, again, you don't start off knowing all the names. Like, it's good to know these major landmark names and the major proportions. And that way, when you're drawing things, you can draw more consistently. And it's like most people aren't 7.5 big heads tall. You will occasionally meet people that are like 8 heads tall. It's pretty rare, but most people are around that 6 to like 6.5 heads tall, or naturalistic proportions. But some people are even more different than that. But you'll find the landmarks will always be there, and this is helpful. The 7.5 head figure is helpful just as a general map of where to start. Same with proportions of the face. Usually when you're sketching someone's portrait, you tend to make their features absolutely, symmetrical. Even though really, someone's eyes tend to be higher or lower than each other. The nose isn't perfectly symmetrical. It just kind of feels that way. It's close, but it's not quite symmetrical. It's like most people have some degree of scoliosis, which is a way your back kind of isn't perfectly curved the way it's supposed to be. The curve is off. Apparently, mine has like almost like a spiral a little bit. And so if you see me walking around, you'll notice one of my shoulders sits a little bit lower than the other one when I'm in a relaxed pose. I can kind of force them to be level, but it kind of looks weird. I don't look like Hunchback of Notre Dame or anything walking around. Most people wouldn't notice it, but it's definitely there. So most people don't have a perfectly proportional stance or perfectly straight stance, but it's a helpful way to kind of think about things, because then you can take the standard or this basic ideal or idea of a figure and apply it to a broad range of categories by simply adjusting everything around. So that's the kind of main things that I would do. And then once you've kind of got your proportions, your landmarks, your form figure, and these major sections down, then you can start working on more nuances. Smaller muscles, like the corrugator supercilii, which is a muscle that helps you furrow your brow. But again, it's a smaller muscle. It's kind of worth knowing just because of the little things it does, but it's not the most important thing. It's like I have to go through it every once in a while and re-memorize the forearm muscles, just because there's a lot of them and I don't always remember which one's which. But one thing to kind of be aware of with any kind of an anatomical term is, so I mentioned the greater trochanter here, right? Well, anytime in anatomy, if there's a greater, there will be a lesser. If there's an interior, there will be an exterior. If there's an anterior, there will be a posterior. So anytime you see those, there's at least a mirror of it. Otherwise, they would just call it, trochanter. But there's a lesser one. It's if you go here, it's down. It's inside the leg, where you don't ever see it, but it's there. You see a little bump on the inside of the femur. But that's the process I would go through. So it would be proportions, major landmarks, form figure, the major masses, the major muscles of the the body, starting with the torso and pelvis, and then then ending on the face, and then the nuances of other things that are worth learning about. A lot of times, if you just don't know the name of a thing, you don't know it exists, and you don't know it's having an effect on what you're trying to do. It doesn't mean like you always have to. It's like if you look at I don't know, Samurai Jack or something like that. You're like they're not as concerned about the corrugator supercilii because of the style that he's working in. But I don't know how to draw Jack, but I know he's got the man bun back there. He's very blocky. But that's the pattern that I would follow, and then depending on the needs of whatever it is you do, that'll show you how much you need to know. Though I always operate under the principle of you need to know more than you need to know because you don't know what you need to know. So I always operate under that principle. So I always love learning new things. It keeps me curious, and there's plenty of categories of things that I've not been aware of that have made a difference for the things that I do. Like learning to work on my own car has taught me a lot about how cars work and how they function and how engines work, especially the process of things as they flow through your machine. And most people who drive a car, including myself up until a number of years ago, just kind of generally blissfully ignorant of what's going on inside the machine, and how the suspension works and how the gas gets into the chambers to be fired up with the with the injectors and all the things that are happening inside the engine, how the exhaust goes out. And knowing that makes it a lot easier for me to design mechanical things. Suddenly I'm not just basing it off of general shapes that I see, but the actual functionality of it, which also can add a lot of verisimilitude to your work. So, so I always operate under that philosophy of you need to know more than you need to know. And I always hate it when I'll hear people say, well, I just need to know this. Or if I just understood this one thing, then I'd be doing great. And, it kind of stops people from moving forward. It gets in the way. And anything like that, for me at least, really, really bothers me. If I'm like, bumping into something, I'm trying to draw something or understand what I'm doing, and I kind of realize that I'm completely ignorant of what's happening. And it's like, it puts this gap in my brain that I have to fill up. It doesn't mean I need to like be able to build a car or a jet engine on a plane, but or that you necessarily want to. But you should learn how things work, whether it's the human body or mechanical things or whatever. It's really helpful to understand the background of it. In fact, one of the things I've noticed, kind of looking at a lot of, especially like the most important, I'd say, concept artists, people whose work gets looked at again and again and again, from film especially. People like Sid Mead or Ralph McQuarrie or others. A lot of them, I'm not sure about Ralph McQuarrie, but I know Sid Mead, he had a background in, what's it called, industrial design. And that made a big difference for how he thought about how things are put together in his work. That he was, have that deeper understanding of mechanical function, that I didn't have or don't have to the same degree he would have. And To say that doesn't matter, I think, is just fallacious. Like it matters, and it's the kind of thing that you don't necessarily notice when you're, say, consuming some media directly. It's not a conscious thing that you'll notice when you're watching a movie or playing a game or reading something. But it is something your brain kind of picks up, and I think it adds to the cool factor too. That this thing has like a real, apparently functional process. It's one of the things I noticed that was like different between original Star Wars and Disney Star Wars. So there's the first Disney one, they replicated a lot of story beats from the original movies. Um, and one of them that I kind of took special note of was the scene where they have that BB-8 character, little round ball guy, who's just an R2D2 clone. They have him go repair something, and instead of him, instead of that little robot, instead of it going in and like tweaking some knobs and pressing some buttons and wiring things up, it just like bangs on the wall and it works. And what they're doing is they're playing off of a scene from the original Star Wars movies where Han Solo kind of does that when he walks in and like the lights don't turn on properly or something. I think it's in Empire, and it turns everything back on. So they're playing off of that, but they're also playing off of a scene in the original one where R2D2 is fixing up Luke's X-wing after it's been shot. He's in there rewiring things. And if you watch that scene, the robot is running around, actually rewiring things. It's plugging things in, it's moving things around, it's actively, engaging with the scene, like it's actually doing something. Whereas the newer J.J. Abrams Star Trek or Star Wars, it's just like banging on the walls. One of these is going to be, I think, in the long term, it's going to be more engaging and memorable than the other. The other one's going to be like, oh, look what a cute little joke. And the other one's like, oh, yeah, this is really neat. Like, he's going around, he's fixing everything. And, you can feel the tension because he's trying to rewire things while there's explosions going on. So it just makes a big difference for the storytelling parts of it. And the um, so like learning about how things function, I think is really really helpful. So whether it's anatomy or mechanical things or whatever, developing uh, understanding in those areas, I think makes a really really big difference for the work that you do, because it kind of forms a foundation under the stories and the things you're trying to show. It also demonstrates to say if you're trying to find work, it demonstrates to employers that you're curious, that you try to figure things out, that you're a problem solver, that you understand you know you understand the solution. So yeah, but that's how I go about anatomy. Like, proportions, landmarks, major forms, and then the major muscle masses. And that's like that'd be like the level 1 through 4 phase, and then developing nuances after that. And that can include a lot of different things, like building écorché, so like a flayed model of the figure. You can do that digitally or physically. Both probably work really well. So with clay or with ZBrush or Nomad Sculpt or Blender or whatever. Um, so that can be. I think that's like subsequent to that basic understanding. I wouldn't start with net crochet necessarily. I mean, maybe there's a good reason to, but I think it's probably just too much information at the very, very beginning. So, yeah, hopefully that was helpful. Obviously go figure drawing if you can, depending on where you're at. That makes a big difference. When memorizing anatomy parts, I actually like to use my own body. Just like, okay, I point at the muscle here, the muscle here. Like, this is the pollicis brevis and longus, the muscles that go out to your thumb. There's two of them right here. Remember those. I don't remember which one's in front, which one's in the back, though. But that's kind of a smaller. I would consider that a nuance. I wouldn't include that with a class when I'm teaching as a requirement to know, especially a level 1 figure drawing class. But it's worth knowing. So if you come across it and you happen to remember it, it's good to know. I think the trouble I've seen, like I said, the other artist I was mentioning, if you kind of start with the end and the beginning of your intent to only do stylized structuring of the figure, so that's like all you want to learn is the stylization. The problem you run into is if you don't learn the real things, is you just kind of being a regurgitated style of somebody else rather than someone who is versed in what they're doing. And that's never really a good place to be. You want to have your own voice, your own style, even if you're adaptable to other people's styles in a studio situation or whatever. It's something to definitely consider. I should finish putting together my figure drawing course. But, right now it's perspective stuff, which I also think is definitely worth knowing, like understanding how to render ellipses and why. I think that's a big part of the course. So, yeah, that's kind of what I. Kind of squished here in the corner. But yeah, so put some value on here. Anyway, excited about the new year we've entered into. Seems like there's a lot going on. Some of it more troublesome than others. But, you know, but I'm excited. I think there's a lot of possibility going on in spite of the challenges. Hopefully it's not delusional, but so yeah. Anyway, I'm going to get back to some stuff today. I think I've got some projects to write up for my students for next week, and then lots of other things to do. So anyway, thanks everybody that came in. I appreciate it, and we'll talk to you all later.